Welcome to the Utah Retirement Systems webinar series. While this webinar has been pre-recorded, the information is still relevant. Please see the description below for links to the different sections within the video and other helpful information. We hope you find this webinar to be a useful resource in your retirement planning.
Welcome, everybody, to the webinar addressing your Tier 2 hybrid option. So today we're going to discuss the hybrid option within that Tier 2 pension system, applicable to all those folks who joined Utah Retirement Systems after July 1st of 2011. So with that, let's just kind of jump right in. And as Corey said, we'll stick around and stay on the webinar until questions are answered at the end. But if you do have any questions kind of as we go through this, feel free to just type those in. When we look at retirement income, most of us look at 3, perhaps 4 different sources of income when it comes to retirement. One of those being your pension. Now, a pension is going to be something that's going to be based on a formula that we'll talk about here in just a few minutes, how we can kind of calculate what that pension might look like in terms of replacing your retirement income. And then in addition to that, most people will have Social Security, which is a federally based income source, which works a lot like a pension, right? It'll come for you as a paycheck in retirement. And then in addition to that, savings plans. I know that URS has an opportunity for several different savings plans. That would be like a 401k, a 457 plan, perhaps a traditional or a Roth IRA. Distributions from those savings plans can supplement those 2 guaranteed sources of income that will come through in retirement, being the URS pension or Social Security. And then in addition to that, some folks have other income from maybe they might have a savings account or a brokerage account that's outside of their retirement account that could provide dividends for them or some kind of rental income. So those are kind of the 4 different sources of income that folks might have when looking to kind of replace their current working income. Okay, so what is a pension? What I like to think of a pension as is just kind of a paycheck for life, a paycheck in retirement, right? When you're working through your working years, you get your paycheck from your employer. And then for those of us that have this pension, we kind of transition into retirement and we get the paycheck in retirement. That's going to be based on this formula that we'll go through here in just a minute. That paycheck is going to be based on, your number of years of service and your salary. It also provides options for you to provide for beneficiaries. Now, with a pension here at URS, within that hybrid system, that beneficiary or the person that you can share that pension with is going to be your spouse. And then it also offers, once you do retire and you start receiving that paycheck in retirement, it's going to provide for you cost of living increases so you can kind of keep up, if you're retired for quite some time, those cost of living increases will help you keep up the spending capacity of that pension. Okay. So now that we kind of have defined what a pension is, we know that it's a paycheck in retirement. Well, what makes you eligible within the Utah retirement systems to collect that pension? And one number I really want to focus on here is that number 4, right? So that 4 is the amount of service you need to have within the system to be able to collect this pension. That's when you become vested in the employer contribution, right? So if you were to work for 3.5 years, there would be no vesting. You wouldn't have ownership in this pension. Once you hit 4 years, you can become eligible, or you do become eligible, to collect this retirement paycheck, this pension, at age 65. And then, of course, sometimes there are folks who, start working younger in their careers. I think when I think about this, I have a daughter who has a friend who just started out in teaching. She's 20 years old. So, she'll have 35 years of service when she's 55 years old. So she can start collecting her pension within the URS system at age 55 because she'll have those 35 years of service. So those are kind of the two qualifiers. Age 65 with 4 years of service, maybe for folks, kind of like me, who started within the URS system maybe a little bit, later in their career. They'll be eligible to collect this pension at age 65. And then for folks who started younger, may be able to attain those 35 years prior to age 65. Once you hit 35 years, regardless of your age, you are eligible to collect this pension. Okay. The system does have some flexibility that's built into it, however, and you can see there down below some of that flexibility that is incorporated into this hybrid system. If you have 10 years of service, you can apply for your pension and you're eligible to collect your pension at age 62. Or if you have 20 years of service, you're eligible, you can apply for your pension at age 60. But you can see there, next to those two notes there, there's an asterisk, and that asterisk means, if you were to collect this pension without having those 35 years of service, or age 65 with 4 years, your benefit would be subject to what's called an early age reduction. And that early age reduction kind of comes into play if you think about it. You haven't, or your employer hasn't been paying into the pension system on your behalf for, those 35 years, or as long as, to become fully vested in that service. Or you're not age 65, so your employer maybe hasn't been contributing for as long as the actuaries may have determined necessary, or you'll be collecting that pension for a longer period of time because you're collecting it a little bit early. So what is the early age reduction? So if you have fewer than 35 years of service and you retire before age 65, your pension benefit is going to be reduced. And what does that reduction look like? Well, we'll talk about what the calculation here is in just a second. But what this early age reduction means, let's say I retire at age 60 with those 10 years of service. So I'll calculate what my pension is, and then I'll go to the gross benefit, and I will be receiving between 63 and 64 cents on the dollar of that ultimate benefit. So you can see, kind of as you work your way through and closer to age 65 without having those 35 years, that pension reduction is going to be reduced. If I were to retire at age 64, didn't have those 35 years of service, I'd be collecting about 91 cents on the dollar of that calculated pension benefit. So what's the calculated pension benefit? With a pension, your benefit is always going to be formulatically based. Okay, so we always go back to this formula to determine what your pension might look like. So you just put your numbers or your personal, experience, your work experience into this calculation, and you'll be able to determine what your basic yearly benefit might be. So, number of years of service times a multiplier of 1.5% times the average of your highest 5 years of income. That's going to be your basic annual benefit. So you can kind of see here in terms of what we have control over, right? To a certain degree as employees, we have a control over how long we work. The longer we work, the higher our ultimate pension benefit is going to be. And the higher our average annual salary, the higher that benefit's going to be. So, whenever you have opportunity to, earn more income through either promotions or doing extra work, that's going to increase your annual income, which in turn is going to increase ultimately what your benefit is going to look like. So here's kind of just a rough example. And like I said, you just kind of fill in your own numbers for this, right? If we look at this example and we can say, okay, let's take a look at somebody who's worked for 35 years, maybe my daughter's friend who's the teacher, right? She's worked for 35 years, so we take that 35 times that 1.5% multiplier. So she's going to get about 52.5% of the average of those highest 5 years of income. So the average of that in this example is $40,000. So about $21,000 a year is going to be that annual benefit for her, which equates to about $1,750 a month. Okay. So you don't need to make a decision with regard to your pension payout options until you go to retire. So I know, for a lot of us, that might be a ways down the road, but I think it's kind of good just to have an understanding of what kind of these decisions are once you go to fill out that retirement paperwork. Now, once you make an election in terms of what option you do want to select at retirement, that election is irrevocable. You won't be able to change that. So if we look at the pension payout options, it kind of gives a description of the different options. So if you look at the left between options 1 and option 2, I'm not going to focus on option 2 right away. We'll skip over it for just a second. But those are going to be the ones that are going to provide they're not going to provide a continuing benefit for your spouse. Those are just going to be those options that provide a benefit for you. And then once you pass away, that benefit is going to end. So if you think about it and you retire, if you have a long retirement period of, 30 or sometimes maybe even more years, if you select option number 1, that benefit's going to last that entire retirement period. Right, but on the other side of that, if you think you're going to have a short life expectancy in retirement, if you pass away a couple of years into that retirement, that benefit will end at your death under option number 1. Now, options number 3 through 6, those provide a continuing benefit for your spouse. And this is your spouse at the time that you apply for retirement. So let's kind of walk through these individually, and we'll break out option 3 versus option 5 individually. So those two options, they're going to be a little bit less than that option number 1, right? Because it's going to be based on 2 life expectancies, your life expectancy and that of your spouse. So it's going to potentially be for a longer period of time. So the actuaries kind of go and figure out, that number, and then they reduce that maximum pension benefit by a little bit, kind of based on those 2 life expectancies. If we look at option number 3 is just going to provide a guaranteed monthly check for you, regardless of who passes away first, you or your spouse. So you can kind of look at that as just guaranteed income to the household through the second of you and your spouse to die. Then we kind of compare that to option number 5, which continues to provide, or also provides, 100% payout to your surviving spouse. The difference between option 3 and option 5 is option 3 doesn't factor in who is to pass away first or second, where option 5 does. In option 5, if you pass away, you'll get that calculated benefit for the rest of your life. If you pass away, your spouse will continue to get that same benefit for the rest of your spouse's life. But the difference here in option 5 is if your spouse predeceases you on your spouse's death, your benefit will revert back up to option number 1, or that maximum benefit available to you for the rest of your life. So, when you're going to fill out that retirement paperwork and you've determined you want to leave a continuing benefit for your spouse, you'll want to kind of compare what that benefit looks like between option 3 and option 5 and see which one may make more sense to you, right? If you have a spouse that might be, significantly older or not in as good of health as you may want to consider option number 5. As opposed to option number 3. And then options number 4 and 6 kind of provide that same rationale as 3 and 5. The main difference is between 4 and 6, if you pass away, it provides a 50% ongoing benefit to your spouse. So option 4, you pass away, your spouse will get 1/2 of that benefit for the rest of the spouse's life. Option 6, you pass away, your spouse will get 50% of that benefit for the rest of the spousal life. But if the spouse predeceases you again, your benefit upon your spouse's death will revert back up to option number 1. So that's kind of the basic gist of the options 1 and then 3 through 6. Now, option 2 is not an option within the Tier 2 hybrid account at this time. Option 2 will become an option for us if the account or the plan ever becomes contributory. And what that means is becoming contributory is if we are required to pay a portion of the cost of this pension, contribute a little bit out of our own paychecks to pay for this paycheck in retirement through payroll deduct. So this again is not an option for us at this time, but it may become an option down the road at some point in time. So let's kind of look at a numerical example of how these options might work. I think sometimes instead of kind of just reading how they work, it's kind of nice to see the numbers. Now recall, you put your numbers in here to determine what yours might look like because everybody's different, right? Everybody works for a different amount of time. Everybody has a different average salary. There may be differences between the member age and the spouse's age. But in this example, based on an average salary, final average salary of $40,000 a year. So this member's worked for 35 years, so there's not going to be any early age reduction that's associated with this benefit. So the member's going to get the full calculated benefit. And the member's age is 65 with the spouse's age being 62. So what does it look like when we come to retire? What options are there? So if we look under this option number 1, again, that's always going to be the highest option, right? Payable for the member's life only, no continuing benefit to the spouse. That's going to provide a benefit of about $1,750 a month, coming every month for the entire retirement period of the member. And then if the member elects to share that benefit with the spouse at 100% level, you can see options 3 versus option 5. So option 3 would say, $1,550 is going to come in per month, regardless of who passes away first or last. That $1,550 is going to be the guaranteed household income through both you and your spouse's retirement period. Versus option 5, where option 5 would say, okay, it's going to be, a little bit less to pay for that reversion to option number 1. But in option 5, you retire, you get the $1,476 a month. If you pass away, your spouse will continue to get $1,476 a month. But if your spouse predeceases you, upon your spouse's death, your benefit reverts back up to the $1,750 a month. And that would be payable to you for the rest of your retirement life. So, and then again, options 4 through 6, or 4 and 6, provide the same kind of rationale, but with a 50% ongoing benefit to your spouse. So those are kind of things to think about. Again, just kind of knowledge to keep in the back of your mind as you're kind of working towards retirement. You don't make this decision until you actually fill out that retirement paperwork. So, a lot of things can change in the intervening years in your personal life and in what you may need in terms of retirement income. So you won't have to make that decision until you fill out that paperwork. So we've kind of run through some examples, but in order to kind of get an idea of what that benefit may look like for you, we do have online calculators that allow you to kind of go in and run scenarios as to what your pension benefit might look like. So you put you'd be in the Tier 2 hybrid plan. Would be one of the options that it would request that you populate in one of these online calculators. You need to know both your birth date and your spouse's birth date, your date of retirement. So for the retirement system, you can retire either on the 1st or the 16th of any month. So you'd have to populate one of those two dates of the month for your retirement date. And then number of years of service and your average salary, and that will give you a calculation based on those 6 different options as to what your individual benefit might look like. And I would just encourage you to go occasionally and look at this calculator and see how your benefit changes as your situation in employment changes. These online calculators, you need to log into your account. So urs.org, and then log in to your account just like you're logging in to check your personal URS balances, and there'll be an option there to access these online calculators. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, going back, we go back to that formula, number of years of service times 1.5% times the average of your highest 5 years of income is going to equate to that basic monthly benefit, right? So how do you boost that benefit? Well, you work longer. The more years you work, the higher that number in that equation is going to be. And whenever you get opportunities, like I mentioned, to make more money, whether it's through promotions or working special projects or whatever it may be to increase that income, that's going to ultimately increase what your benefit is going to look like. The higher those numbers are in that formula, the higher that benefit's going to be. Now, there is a third way to increase that benefit within the Tier 2 system, and that's purchasing credit or purchasing service. And if you're interested in this, there's a couple of great brochures on the URS website. In fact, the URS website has a ton of great information that you can kind of educate yourself as to how these different benefits work and how to make the most of them for you as a member. But one of these options is under our publications in the purchasing service credit, and you can see there are a couple of different ways within the Tier 2 system to purchase service. The first one is a service purchase or a service credit. And the way that you would go about that, you can do this at any time in your career. So if you have, if you've worked in another public system, perhaps in another state, maybe you worked in Idaho or Wyoming, or you have any kind of federal service credit, pension service credit, you can transfer that service credit from that other system into the Utah system. Now, if this is something that you want to do, you need to get the two systems kind of talk to each other, the Utah system versus the system that you were in, to determine kind of the specifics of purchasing that credit. And then you'd have to forfeit that credit in that other system. So forfeiting that credit. And with these service purchases, you can also use military service, and that's the one exception. If you wanted to purchase any kind of military service in the Utah system, you would not have to forfeit your military service. With the service credit, like I said, you can purchase this service credit at any time in your career. So if you're considering doing this, if you're eligible, you may have service credit in some other system, it is typically more beneficial to do that sooner rather than later. So that cost of that service purchase credit, as your income increases, the cost of that credit's going to increase. And that's kind of the benefit of the service purchase versus the future service purchase is, you know, purchasing existing service is allowed at any point in time. Now, if we kind of switch gears to purchasing future service credit, that's a little bit different because you're purchasing service credit that you haven't accrued yet, right? So you're going to need to purchase that, and within the system, once you purchase that future service credit, you're required to immediately retire. So this is done more towards the end of your career, right? You need to be an active employee within the system to purchase that service credit. And you can purchase up to 5 years. You'll need to purchase enough service credit to avoid that early age reduction. So, you know, that online calculator, when we were talking about estimating what your benefit might look like, there's also an option or a calculator out there where you could calculate what the cost of this future service purchase might be. So you may, if you're thinking about that, you may want to kind of calculate that. And, you know, if it's in your plans and you're a kind of a long-term planner, kind of thinking about purchasing future service credit, you may want to calculate what that cost may be so you can kind of start saving into one of those retirement savings accounts to help you affect that ultimate future service purchase credit. Okay. All right. So really, we're kind of focusing on more of the pension component of the hybrid system. But there is a 401k component in this hybrid system as well. And, you know, as you can see here, our employer contributes 10% of our income to the pension system every time we get paid. So, you know, every paycheck you get a deposit into your bank account, your employer is also writing a check to the pension system to purchase your service credit. And, you know, if the cost of the pension is below that 10%, the difference goes into your 401k account. So you can see here right now the cost of the pension, which varies from year to year. It changes every July, so you'll kind of see that change in your 401k contribution every July. But, you know, right now for this fiscal year, the cost of the pension is about 9.4%. So your employer's putting in 10%, so that difference of about 0.6% is being deposited by your employer into your 401k to kind of complete that 10% contribution made by your employer. And this is kind of, this equation will show you again, you know, we kind of briefly talked about that payout option number 2, when you're selecting your payout options when you go to retire. If the cost of the pension ever was above that 10%, we needed to contribute a little bit to support that paycheck in retirement into the pension system. That's where payout option number 2 in retirement would be a choice for us. Okay, so what if you die before retiring? There is a one-time payment, a one-time death benefit. This requires you to be, this one-time payment requires you to be an active member. So this is while you are actively employed with a URS employer, right? You will get a one-time payment that's equal to 75% of your highest annual salary. That will just be transferred to your beneficiary. So again, this one does require active employment. So, you know, I would encourage everybody to go in and look at their beneficiary designations, right? Make sure that beneficiary designation under the RET category is who you want that person to be. And then again, kind of as a best practice, you should probably consider naming a primary beneficiary. And if that primary beneficiary is not able to take ownership of that benefit, you'd want to look to a contingent beneficiary. So who would you want to take ownership of that if the primary beneficiary wasn't available? So that's a one-time payment that requires, again, active membership within the URS system. But there's also a career benefit that's available. And what is that career benefit that's available? So this career benefit's kind of an ongoing benefit that does not require active employment. So if you've been in, like we said, this is only going to be available to the spouse. So, if you've been married for at least 6 months, your spouse will be eligible for this career benefit. If you qualify for retirement, but you're not yet retired, so there are some folks out there that they're qualify for retirement. They're 63, 64, have the qualifying number of years in there, 65 to receive a retirement benefit, but they just haven't applied for it. Well, their spouse would be able to apply for that benefit. And then thirdly, if you're just working and maybe you started your career young and you're not quite to the age where you would qualify or the number of years that you'd qualify for full retirement, but you've worked for at least 15 years. So if you've worked for 15 years, there will be a benefit that's available to your spouse if you pass away before accessing that full retirement benefit. And roughly that's about a third of your calculated benefit from 15 to 19 years. And then 20 to 24 years, it's about 2/3. And then if you have more than 25 years, it's considered a full benefit. So that's kind of those benefits if you pass away before retiring. Okay, so now we've kind of talked a little bit about how to calculate that retirement benefit. What might that look like? How to enhance it and increase it ultimately. Maybe not a whole lot of folks on the webinar that are getting close to retirement, since this is kind of a fairly young system, right? This has only been around since 2011, but there may be a couple people out there that are thinking about retirement and want to know how to go about accessing that benefit. So let's talk a little bit about the steps to retirement. Okay, so within 2 to 3 years before you plan to retire, you should make note of that number down at the bottom of this slide, 801-366-7770. That's the number that's going to get you to our pension department, and you can request a pension benefit estimate. So what we kind of do there is we go and we kind of, we more formalize what that estimate might look like as opposed to the online calculator. We'll put your number of years of service and we'll round it to the third digit. So you're getting benefit for every, all of that service credit. And then we're looking at those average of those high 5 years. And with that, we'll calculate something that looks like the payout options 1 through 6, but it will be specific to your situation. So, again, within 2 to 3 years, request that pension benefit estimate. Gives you a better idea of kind of planning your cash flow, right, in retirement. Is this one source of income going to help me or going to be enough to help me kind of provide that retirement lifestyle that I may want? And then determine your retirement date. So like I'd mentioned earlier, there are 2 options in terms of a retirement date within the UR system, and that's the 1st or the 16th of any month. Now it has to be after your last day of work, right? So if maybe if you're a school teacher and your district ends school on May 31st, your retirement date might be June 1st. But then so I've found through kind of my discussions with some members that sometimes school districts work into June. So if you worked for a school district and your last day of work in that school district was, maybe June 7th, then your retirement date would be the 16th of the month. And that kind of falls true, again, the same kind of logic will pass through for the different job classifications within the URS system. The retirement date has to be that earliest date of any month after your last day of work. Okay, and then 2 to 3 months prior to that retirement date, that's kind of that window, 90-day window to request a retirement application or make an appointment to apply for retirement with our office. So there are 3 different ways to kind of access the retirement application. You can make an appointment, which is really probably for most folks the preferred way to do it. Just make an appointment and sit across from a retirement advisor here at our office that helps you fill out that paperwork to make sure that it's completed completely and properly. You don't have to worry about anything outstanding that you may have missed. But if you don't really want to make that appointment, you can request that retirement application be mailed to you, and we'll just mail it to your address on file. Or there's a third option now where you can call that number down below, that 7770 number, and request that the pension department actually drop an application into your online account. And then you can fill it out electronically. Okay, so what do you need to retire? What kind of materials do you need to kind of get in place? Sometimes, I know for me, I think I'd probably have to dig to find a few of these certificates. So just kind of have an idea of where these are and get copies of these if needed. So a copy of your birth certificate and that of your spouse. And then you'll also need a copy of your marriage certificate. And then that voided check. So the routing number and the account number is really kind of what we're looking for, just to know kind of where to make that deposit of that pension check, right? And we encourage that to happen electronically. Through electronics funds transfer is the safest way to do that. So we would need to know, again, that information, the routing and account number. Okay, so what are the forms that are going to be required to complete this application? So there's the application itself, and this W-4P tax withholding form. That's just, I kind of look at it like I look at a W-2 form, right? How much do I want to have withheld from my pension to for my taxes? So with this, this could change. You're kind of transitioning to a new income situation. So, as you need to change that, you can change it. Things change when you retire, and your tax situation may change, but we'll ask you to fill that out with the retirement application. And then once you complete that, if you need to change it, you can. You'll need to list that, make that option, select, options 1, 2 if applicable, and then 3 through 6. This is where you'll make that election as to the payout that you want. And then the direct deposit form, again, where do you want those funds to go? You have to terminate your service before you're able to retire. So we'll have to get a notice of termination. And then you'll have to sign the notice of post-retirement employment restrictions, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Okay, so a few things to consider once you get that start getting that pension check. Regardless of when you apply, whether it's kind of up to 90 days before your retirement date, or you have up to 90 days after your retirement date to apply for your pension, the first check can take up to 90 days to arrive. And that's just because, the retirement office is going back and forth with your employer to kind of shore up those last weeks of your career, pay for those last weeks of credit, service credit. So it can take up to 90 days to get that first check, but it will be dated retroactively to your retirement date. So that first check will be a larger one. It's not necessarily missing out on any kind of income from your retirement check. It's more of a cash flow issue. So just kind of make sure that you have, enough money in your account to kind of get you through until that first retirement check will hit your account. The retirement check, the pension check, hits once a month, and it's paid on the last business day of each month. Okay, so there is a cost of living adjustment that's also associated with the pension, and I think this is really a great attribute of our pension system. So annually, on the anniversary of your first retirement date, that's when you're going to be seeing these cost of living adjustments. And the cost of living adjustments look to the CPI, which is the consumer price index, which is just really, the cost of a basket of goods within the U.S. economy. How much is that increasing, right? So we're trying to make sure it's keeping up with the rate of inflation. It's going to be based on a simple COLA. So that simple COLA is always going to go back and calculate that benefit on that original payout amount with a maximum of 2.5%. So we can kind of look and we can kind of see, well, what does that kind of looked like in terms of historical COLAs, from 2020 back to 2013, you can see, the low of being about 10 basis points up to about 2.4% in 2018. So it's never really hit that maximum 2.5% COLA, right? You've always kind of gotten it based on what the CPI is. Now, this year we hear kind of a lot of short-term concern over inflation maybe being, higher. We hear Social Security, their inflation COLA was, upwards of 5.5%. Because inflation, there are some shorter term inflation worries out there in the economy. So if inflation does go above this 2.5%, you'll get the 2.5%, and then any difference will go into a COLA bank, your own personal COLA bank that you can use in future years. So if inflation were to go to 5% this year, you'd get the 2.5% increase. Your COLA bank would be funded at a 2.5% rate. And then, 5 years down the road, we'll say hypothetically, if inflation goes back to about 1.5%, or you'd be able to pull from that COLA bank to subsidize that 1.5% COLA. So you never lose it. You can draw from that COLA bank in future years. And again, for people who are expecting long retirement periods, this COLA is very valuable attribute of this Tier 2 pension system. Okay. Couple of other things to consider: taxes. So your pension is going to be subject to state and federal income taxes. That's why you kind of have that W-4P withholding form. Now, if you move to a state, maybe a state like Wyoming right now doesn't have state income tax, you wouldn't be paying state income tax on that pension benefit, still be paying federal income tax. And then you would receive a 1099-R each year. And that's just going to list as kind of, if any of you, get 1099s from other sources of income. It just lists what your income from the pension is going to be, and it helps you file your income taxes, and that comes in January of each year. Okay. Post-retirement rules. Let's talk about that for just a second. So for those folks who retire, start collecting their pension check, and then maybe determine they kind of miss working, right? They want to go back and they want to start working again. Now, these post-retirement rules are only going to be applicable to public employment within the state of Utah. If you go and work for a private employer, if you move to Florida and you work a little bit in the state of Florida, post-retirement rules in the state of Utah are not going to be applicable to that income. It's just, again, any URS employer within the state of Utah, state, county, school district, city, etc. So if you return within 60 days, your retirement check is going to be canceled. You can go back and you can start earning additional service credit, but that additional service credit to calculate maybe potentially a higher ultimate pension benefit is going to be subject to a 2-year vesting requirement. So I guess under this example, if you start collecting that retirement check, you come back into the system, just know that you're going to have to stay for 2 years for any of that additional service credit to be applied to your future benefit. Okay. If you come back between 60 days and 12 months, you can opt to cancel your retirement check again and go back into the system, or you can opt to continue receiving your retirement check. So, the legislature revisits these income limitations on a regular basis. So you'll just want to go and make sure you understand kind of what those income limitations are, if this is kind of a path that you want to consider. But between 60 days and a year, you can continue to receive that retirement check. You can't work in a benefited position, right? So you can't get any health insurance, you can't get any paid time off, no employer paid benefits. And your salary is going to be limited to, half of your final average salary or just over $17,000 a year. So kind of just, some spending money outside of that pension will be that salary limitation. And then the third option, which is probably going to be the cleanest option for folks, is to stay out of the URS system for a consecutive 12 months. And make sure that that is a consecutive 12 months. If you came back maybe after 90 days and worked for a couple of weeks and decided it really wasn't for you, that 12-month clock would start over from that termination date within that 90-day period. So it's a consecutive 12 months. You can continue to receive your retirement check. There aren't going to be any limitations on income. There won't be any limitations on employer paid benefits, other than the employer will not be able to contribute to your retirement account. Okay. Or if you want to cancel that retirement check, you can cancel that retirement check and accrue additional service credit, again, subject to that 2-year vesting rule. Okay. So for more information, like I said, we have tons of information on our website that are educational and just to kind of help you understand. So I just encourage everybody to engage with URS throughout your working career so you can kind of plan and understand what your retirement might look like. Log into your URS account, make sure we're accurately capturing your income and your years of service. And then, on a personal basis, you can always access those retirement planning calculators and kind of see what that might look like for you. There are tons of brochures that are out there that kind of, again, help kind of enhance that understanding of the different systems and forms that you may need, to consolidate retirement plans, retirement savings plans, or other forms for different needs. We also have individual retirement planning sessions that, the website is great and the webinars are great and the seminars are really, really, really beneficial for those folks kind of on a broad based, kind of give you a broad-based idea how the system works broadly. But if you're more interested in kind of looking at your own individual situation, these individual retirement planning sessions are a great resource where our retirement planning experts, educators will kind of run through your specific situation. And really what that kind of helps inform is that pie, right? The replacement of the pension, Social Security, and supplementing those sources of income through your retirement savings accounts. Are you saving enough? Are you invested properly? Are you saving in the right kind of account? Those are some of the kinds of things we address in these individual retirement planning sessions. And you access those and register for those through the education tab within your URS account. And then seminars. So we're holding, seminars. We've been holding them virtually this year. We're hopeful that we'll be able to provide some in-person seminars coupled with some virtual seminars next year as well, so that you'll be able to kind of understand from a kind of a broader based perspective those retirement benefits. And then again, kind of how you access those individual retirement planning sessions. Really encourage, if you haven't done one of these, to take the time and register for these. We're doing them both in person and virtual, so there's better accessibility to planners in kind of the mode that you're most comfortable with.